transfer it to Dan, and we're just going to pass it along here. Before we get started, we have some announcements. The first one's not good news if you didn't see Spin this week, but last week we were praying for our beloved Lynn Ferrazzoli Navarrete, who's been battling cancer, and she passed away actually last Sunday. Her memorial will be March 7th, and it's hard. She leaves behind a 4-year-old daughter, Zoe, and of course her husband Dave, and some good close family. They have been very, very appreciative of all the help that the deacons and others have provided with meals and cards and calls, and that's made a big difference. And so I thank you on behalf of Lynn and behalf of all our family. On a brighter note, Marty Hartrick is back with us after open heart surgery. And Marty, do you want to?
Yes, I would. As most of you know, this church is totally unbelievable. And I just am trying now to find the words from Don and I to express our thanks to everybody here. Okay. I just want to find the words to thank everybody who has been so supportive and loving to us over these last few weeks. It's been quite an experience for both of us, and we've come through it with flying colors, and I want to thank everybody for that. A couple special people. I want to thank Marty Cermak for preparing the care calendar for us and taking the time to all the details on it, so thank you for that. I want to thank Steve for being, as we all know, the best doctor in the world. That goes without saying, really. But also, I just wanted to share all the wonderful things that people have done for us. I have a stack of cards this thick of people that have sent us beautiful cards. We have had so much wonderful food delivered to our house. It's incredible. We thank you for that. And the visitors who came to see me, at one point, Don and I had to laugh because we thought we might have to take our front door off and put a revolving door on. Because there were just so many people coming through, so it was great. Cards, texts, emails, everything. Thank you so much. Thank you.
We love you, Marty. I have to say, I don't think you'll mind me sharing this because Marty likes to laugh, but when I saw her last week, she said, well, you know, we finally felt we had to go off the care calendar. The care calendar is a great online thing where people sign up for things they need, particularly around meals, and then people will say, oh, I'll bring a meal Tuesday night, I'll bring something Saturday morning. And she said it was so great and everything was so wonderful, but they felt like, you know, we could probably do it ourselves, but it's so great getting all this good food. And there is yet even more wonderful news and a mazel tov to Victor and Car, our beloved brothers, who were married here yesterday. Just yesterday afternoon. And you're both here today, and they said it wouldn't last. No, that is... Will you please join me in a prayer for illumination? Beloved God, beloved, we give thanks for this day, for this beautiful part of your creation where we get to gather, for a community where there are no strangers, just new friends and delightful background music. Help us, God, to slow down from all that we've been rushing around. Help us to take full, deep breaths. Help us to quiet the busy voices, that we might just be here now. And God, we always pray that your Spirit sweep over us and soften our hearts and open our minds. And let the words spoken become the words we need to hear as we strive to live the love that you have created in us and around us and through us. In your many holy names we pray. Amen.
Amen.
So, this text from Exodus is in between the period where the Jews have fled Egypt and before they've entered the Promised Land, where eventually the people will rally and demand a king. And so there's this in-between period, and in that period, to ensure order, as you heard, Moses is a judge, basically. And there is a book in the Bible called Judges, and it covers this period when people were selected because of their wisdom and their distaste for dishonest gain. And then they handled all of the disputes and conflicts. So I wanted to sort of delve into some of this, and I wanted to, instead of like just jumping off and talking about, oh, you know, this is what this says to me or how I think we should think about this. So I just want to walk through it together. And the very first verse, there's actually a bunch of verses between the very first verse that Marty read and the next verse she read. But I really like this. Moses went out to meet his father-in-law. He bowed down and kissed him. Each asked after the other's welfare, and they went into the tent. And I will say that in Corinthians, because we were reading from 1 Corinthians last week, in Corinthians, there was a lot of love in the chapter that we read. And this line is from Corinthians 16, but it came to my mind reading this about Moses and his father-in-law. Paul writes to the Corinthians, which is a church, greet one another with a holy kiss. So first, as we start this discussion today, I just wanted to start with that. Greet each other with a holy kiss. And I would just like to, anything where that comes to your mind, what that brings to your mind about greet each other with a holy kiss. This actually gets, we don't talk about it all the time, but we do. But it is common amongst, people who read the book and clergy to use that phrase. Yes?
What is the last word?
Kiss. Greet each other with a holy kiss. Yeah. Love you too. Anyone want to jump in on this?
Well,
Yeah.
is it, I understand to say, see the Christ in them.
Mm. Great.
Just look at everybody like the Christ.
Yeah. Great. I should say, there are no, I'm not going to say there's any wrong answers. This is what I want to, and Marty has a...
Thank you, Marty.
Thank you, Marty. It seems like that phrase is very similar to what we just did here, where we all get up and greet one another with whatever words we feel are, appropriate at that time. And you give one for us to say it again, because I forgot.
May the peace of God be with you.
Yeah, and also with you. So it seems that it's very similar to that in the way we greet one another.
Yeah, Ann.
Throw a shadow on it. I thought of something completely different.
Yeah.
When you said greet each other with a holy kiss, because Judas betrayed Jesus with a kiss, and even in The Godfather, the symbol was when he went up, and I didn't. So the kiss is supposed to be, this is my closest person. This is the person who I truly love. So you can have honest, holy kisses, or you can have a kiss of betrayal as well.
Wow, that's great. Yeah. Anyone else want to weigh in on this? Yeah, Robin.
If holiness is in your mind, then, I mean, if that's foremost, then anything you do, including kissing, is going to be holy.
Great, great. Yeah, this is all great. You know, so today after the service, we're going to have our annual congregational meeting, and then one of the things we do is we just talk about what we've done in the course of the past year. And when we come here, a lot of what we do is coming here. And so, as Marty said, you know, we greet each other with what could be called a holy kiss. And my mind hadn't even gone there, but I think that it had started to go there in that what we do is, what I feel it is it's about reminding us what position we're coming to, how we're coming to each other, right? And there are two very big things there. Holy, right? Holy meaning sacred, meaning set apart and divine, and kiss, which is incredibly affectionate and intimate. And I think sometimes we forget both. I think the church sometimes forgets both completely. You know, and we all sort of know those churches. When Jill and I were working on the sign for outside this church, we had this debate. Should we put all or welcome on the sign? Because every church says that, and so often they don't mean it. So it almost felt hypocritical, and that's what churches have. So we want to embrace these two aspects in how we come to each other. One, holy, just seeing the reflection of God in every face, approaching someone as you might approach a church, with respect and reverence, and the kiss. And that, I think, you know, this crowd, we do pretty good. We're pretty much, you know, we're huggers, some of us are kissers. And when George, our pastor emeritus, and I went to visit Erin Dottie when she was transitioning, and there were several folks from the church there, and when George and I were leaving, I'm hugging and kissing everybody as I go, and George just says, you see, this is how Paul and I are really different in our ministry. He says, I don't do any of that hugging and kissing stuff. But this community does. You know, we are huggers. However, what do we need to do to remember that what these words are not just for when we're in this beautiful, small room? That it's calling us to have this divine affection for everyone wherever we go. And so how do we do that? Like, how do you approach somebody with from a position of not just respect, but affection? So that's the first verse I wanted to pull out here. The next one that comes out to me is Moses' father-in-law sees him doing all this adjudicating for the people, and he says, "Why do you sit alone?" So now again, we're just this is how you just dig into text. You grab onto the part that's speaking to you, and then you bring it up and you think about it, and what is it saying to you? So, you know, the part of this dialogue is that we're pulling out the parts that spoke to me, And I'm hoping that you'll weigh in on how they might speak to you. So here he says, why do you sit alone? So just what comes to your mind about that? Why do you sit alone? Or anything around this, of his father-in-law coming into Fred. I'm so sorry. Fred, you're here, and we missed you, and we're glad that you're here and feeling well. You're loved and missed when you're not here. Mary.
Well, I think he's saying, why do you sit alone in judgment? It means, have you separated yourself from the feelings or the issues? And maybe by having more people who look at a problem or a dispute, it gives a different perspective. If you have only one person's perspective, you may not achieve a good result for the people being judged or for the community. This is why we have banks of judges to review cases all the way up to the Supreme Court, that not one man or one opinion should have such an effect on the people being judged.
That's so great, Mary. Thank you.
But also, it is more intimate. What if it is 5 or 50 or 100? These people lived in very close quarters their whole lives. They were a very small community, and they had to live with the decision that was made. And if someone harmed someone else, there had to be a way to resolve it so that they could live next door to each other, all week, or all year.
You're right. That's great. Thank you. And that's oh yeah, go on, Janice.
I saw this as enjoining Moses to let his people grow up.
Mm.
If he's the great daddy and he's the only one sitting in judgment, everyone is supplicant to him, dependent on him. And his father-in-law said, hey, Moses, you got other very capable people here. Let them grow up, take some of the burden, and also come closer to God. Because in the first scenario, everything's being filtered through one man. This allows everyone to take responsibility.
So great. I'm going to jump in here, and if you have another thought, hold on to it. I just wanted to highlight this because I think this. I love. Thank you both for what you've brought to this. One of the things that happens when we do build community is sometimes we tend to build a community that looks very much like ourselves. Our perspective seems like the correct one. And we just seem to like people who have the correct thinking like we do, right? And so consequently, it's very easy to sort of become siloed, to sort of become a closed system where our ideas are just reflected back to us, and then we don't have the challenge, but also the joy and the delight of seeing from another perspective. And I don't know about you, and this sort of ties in also to what Janice was saying, but I know I've been in situations where I might be in charge of a particular group of people or something, and I prioritize my thinking. I favor my thinking. And there's a way that we can sometimes, some of us, not all of us, but some of us will then, try to influence outcomes so that they reflect what we want. And let's face it, it can be hard to hear other perspectives, to see other perspectives. And this is something we're talking about in our country a lot right now. And part of the thing that we're talking about as we've become increasingly polarized is the fact that we have completely separate sets of news sources. We have completely separate sets of facts and realities, and we're not crossing as we used to be required to do. We used to have in a sense, we used to be a smaller group of people, in that we only had 3 TV channels or X number of radio outlets. And so we might agree with some, disagree with some, but we would have to engage each other. Now we can stay each in our own set of thoughts without having to get that perspective. So, especially as we're building not just a community, but the friendships in our lives, what does it mean to step outside of that comfort zone, to step outside of that expectation of what's right and wrong, to be able to hear someone else's perspective? So, there were a lot more phrases that I wanted to get to, but I asked Marty, because I can go on, to sort of give me a time signal here. I will say, you will surely wear yourself out, Jethro tells Moses. You cannot do it alone. And so one of the reasons, this is actually not the lectionary for Christians, but it is the lectionary in Judaism today. And I thought it spoke to us because we are, at our annual congressional meeting, at our annual Delusions of Grandeur, on my part, better than that. At our annual congregational meeting, it is a moment. It's like a new year, and it's a moment to take stock, to recognize what we've done, to think about what we want to do next. For some of us, everyone just by coming here does a lot, because it is different. When I look out and I see you who've never been here before, that brings into, somehow influences and changes me. And so all of us, just by being here, it brings a lot. But there's also a lot that goes on to just make this hour and something possible. And what we'll see later when we get the annual report is a glimpse of that. You know, that the liturgists and the ushers and the choir who's rehearsing every Thursday night, almost year-round, to come and sing really a couple songs, beautifully. There is, the website and the liturgical arts, and Diane thinks about what should be up here, and the food that we all love when we're done with this part. There is so much. The sound, I can just go on and on. And so these words kind of stuck out to me. You will surely wear yourself out. You cannot do it alone. And one of the reasons why I wanted to say that is because there's something for you to do. This isn't a pressure thing. It's actually an invitation thing, because I think most people who have taken on some level of helping to get something done to make the place tick would say that there's a reward in getting, not just doing the task, doing a service for somebody else, for the community, and also what you get when you work together. And Morgan Beatty, who many of us know, he was one of our tip-top building people, like Woody and Tom DeMunn and Sterling Lynn. And there was something that had to be done underneath the building, and this was in the days when we had to take up the access ramp, and then you had to get down on your belly, and you had to crawl under the floor downstairs of the social hall. And Morgan said to me, it was great one time, he said, he and Sterling had taken care of something under the building on their belly. And Morgan said to me, just the two of us, he said, I could have done it myself. And then Sterling said, we should have masks. And I've got these masks. I'll come this afternoon or tomorrow and we can do it together. And he said, I could have done it myself. But it was so much more fun doing it together. And then he rattled off 2 other people whom he had gotten to know just because he could have done it himself, which is a little bit of that paternal aspect. But by doing it with someone else, his heart was opened up and made bigger. One little technical thing I want to say is, even though it says men, 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 have men before you, blah, blah, blah. Well, in the judges, most of them were men, but there was also Deborah. So even in the most ancient of times, in our Jewish spiritual ancestry, there were women judges. And then the last thing, why? Why do we do it? Why do we do all this work? Why do we make sure that every Sunday the door is open, whether there's going to be 50 people or 5 people? Ralph and I have done services, Ash Wednesday or Blue Christmases, where it's 3 people. And I'll tell you why we do it. Because last Sunday, after we had a fun Love Never Ends sermon about caring and loving, and we went down and had delicious, delicious food, and we were making Valentines, and we were having a very good time, and that's when I heard, Fred, that you weren't feeling well, and I had said, I had decided, this afternoon I'm going to go up and see Fred. And I went upstairs to my office to gather some things, and I was going to my house, which is right next door, and the phone rang, and it was Dave Navarrete. And he said, we're taking Lynn off of life support. And I said, I will be there as quickly as I can. And I went down there, and her mom was there, and Dave's mom, and some aunts, and Lynn's wonderful sister Samantha, and brother-in-law Michael. And we stood there with her as she was slowly eased from the ventilator and passed away. And that was Sunday. And not more than a week later, on Friday, I got a text from Victor. I hope you don't mind me sharing this. Victor says, how quickly can you marry us? And I said, well, as soon as you get a license, and we can do it, the 3 of us, or, if you just want to invite some other folks. And so Saturday morning, I sent out an email. If you didn't get an email, I'm sorry, I couldn't remember everyone's email, but I did send it out to a bunch of folks. And at 3 o'clock on Saturday afternoon, we walked in here, and I don't know, there must have been, 15, 20? Huh? 17 people. 17 people. We had an instant wedding. We all, and everyone who wasn't here wishes they could have been. But how life changes in the moment of a phone call. And in this world today where really a lot of us, we might post something on Facebook, or we might tweet about something that's going on in our lives. But this community is about, I'm dying, I'm getting married, I'm having surgery, and we go, and we gather, and we hug, or handshake, but we are actually there. And I believe that this kind of outpost of human caring is critical to our species, to our future. And so that's why we do this. It's not to satisfy some Presbyterian requirement or to make ourselves feel like we're good people. We do it because we believe in caring about each other and nurturing each other, and we believe we need to keep that outpost open. Will you please join me in prayer? Beloved God, we give thanks for just all the things that happened in our lives that brought us to this point. That all the things we overcame, all the doubts that we still wrestled with, all the difficult personalities we've had to put up with, least of all, perhaps someone having to put up with us, we just give thanks, God, that we made it here. We give thanks for the people who we hold in our heart who may be part of this community or maybe just part of our own community, but we know that here we can bring everybody. We can bring them in prayer, we can bring them in our hearts, we can bring them in real life. We give thanks, God, that when you said love never ends, that's the truth. And so we pray always to be bolder and bolder, to love boldly, to not be alone, to not wear ourselves out, but to lift each other up, to love each other into being, not just on Sunday, but every day. We give thanks in your many holy names and say amen.